Yes. Welcome back once again. Great Cove Life Sciences. Great Cove Life Sciences. We are here again. I'm sure you are following and you are always connected. Today we are here. We just gonna quickly want to talk about negative feedback mechanisms and homeostasis. A quite interesting chapter and unity in your syllabus and exam contribution. Without wasting any time, I'm just going to quickly show you and introduce to you the whole concept that we are going to be discussing today. We talk about homeostasis mechanism. Of course, the first and foremost one is what? It's negative feedback. And then would want to understand how negative feedback work and also the coordination of processes and systems between inside the internal body system for the balancing of homeostasis. We are going to be looking at the various important variables that are important, or various important variables and homeostatic mechanisms that we're going to look at, like balancing of water, salts, regulation of thyroxine levels, regulation of carbon dioxide concentration, and also body temperature. We're just going to look and discuss them right now in this presentation. We are going to also look at the homeostatic control of internal environment, identifying the stimulus as well as the reason for the reasons for importance of regulation, and also the target organs or the effectors that are responsible for that stimulus and so forth. So as you can see, we are going to talk about water, salt, carbon dioxide, just those items that we have identified in the beginning or above here as homeostatic mechanisms. We are going to discuss them now in this presentation. So without wasting any time, we quickly wanna look at these concepts and quickly discuss them so that when we get there, so that when we are going to go to final exams by end of semester, end of term, it will be well done. So negative feedback mechanism, what is it? It is basically an interaction between two hormones. Negative feedback mechanism is basically an interaction between two hormones, between two hormones. That one concept that one point that I want you to take note of, in which one hormone stimulates. So there are two hormones involved. There is one hormone that stimulates an increase. There is an increase that takes place in another hormone, which then inhibits the first hormone, thus restoring a balance. So what happens is that there is a balance that needs to be maintained. How is it maintained? After a hormone goes up, there is another hormone that is also stimulated, or there is another hormone that comes into play, which would inhibit the first hormone. Inhibiting meaning to say it stops it. It stops it from being secreted. It reduces it. It reduces the concentration or the secretion. Reduces the first hormone. So in the other ways, what we need to understand is that homeostasis and negative feedback mechanism, they work hand in glove. So it is a mechanism where a change in a system triggers, it causes a cause in the system triggers or causes a response that reduces or opposes. We say that opposes that initial change, which we identified as to say that there is a change, which we say the initial change, thus bringing the system back towards its set point or equilibrium, hence helps to maintain a stable internal environment despite external changes. So what we need to understand is that there is an initial change that is actually being opposed, and then when it is being opposed, it is actually opposed in order to bring the system back towards its set equilibrium. We are saying the stable equilibrium, we are talking about the narrow limit. In other words, the narrow limit which a condition must operate. Like we talked about carbon dioxide, we talked about carbon dioxide, we talk about salt, we talk about water. So the point of liquid, the point of the set point or point of equilibrium is actually a more narrow limit that a certain condition must operate within. So that condition or that narrow limit, it deviates or it fluctuates within some small ranges, which are identified by changes in hormones concentration. So hormones concentration, they do change. So if a certain condition must go up, there is a certain hormone that must be available to cause an increase. When the increase is sharp enough, another hormone is triggered or it is promoted or it is stimulated to be produced. So therefore that increase is now being brought back to what, to a decrease. So there is a dynamic of increase and decrease of a certain internal environment that is controlled by what, by certain hormones. So irrespective of the external environmental changes or external factors, that narrow limit, it remains or it is actually controlled by those hormones. So in other words, what you need to understand is that negative feedback is a crucial process for maintaining stability. That's what we are just talking about now. It is very important in maintaining stability. It is very important in maintaining stability and balance. What do we call that stability and balance? Is what you call homeostasis. Is what you call homeostasis, class. Homeostasis is actually what you call a stable internal condition or a stable internal condition. So what I want you to understand is that homeostasis is maintained because of negative feedback mechanism. The negative feedback mechanism, it is the one that controls or that promotes homeostasis that we are to discuss in the next few moments to come. So the general sequence of events that occurs in a negative feedback mechanism. What happens in a negative feedback mechanism? There are sequence of events. These events are they are quite sequential. They have got a specific order in which they occur. So what I want you to look at is that there is uh, specific events that occurs. One, an imbalance is detected by the receptor. We are saying an imbalance is what? It's a change. It's a change that is detected by the what? By the receptor. So now what happens is that a control center is stimulated. A control center is stimulated. That is number two. A control center is stimulated. The control center responds when it is actioned, when it is uh, stimulated, it sends a response. A response is a message that is sent to the target organ or organs, which are the effectors. So this control center is actually stimulated. In that regard, what happens is that a target, the target organ, which is the effector, it receives a message that is being sent there. So a message is sent, and therefore causing the effector to respond by sending the opposite of what is being identified as the imbalance that has been found there. So the effector response, it opposes or reverses. It actually controls the imbalance. The reversing is bringing back to normal. Reversing by bringing back by bringing back the change to not to normal, or it's basically reducing what has been detected as a change there. So what I want you to note here is that negative feedback mechanism, it operates with by those situations or by these systems that we are talking about. So bringing back the what, the change to normal, bringing back the change to normal is what we need to understand. So the balance is therefore restored. The balance is therefore what? The balance is restored as what? As number four. the balance is restored by the message that has been sent to the effectors, and therefore the effector responds by sending another signal that opposes that imbalance that has been detected. So we are saying the signal or the response that is being sent or the feedback that is being sent is correcting the imbalance by bringing back the change to normal, and therefore we are in a way bringing, or we are coming to a narrow limit. We are in a way causing the balance to be restored. So let's look at this. What is negative feedback loop? The the negative feedback loop, it is therefore now when a variable deviates, when a variable changes, we are saying when a variable changes, the changes that we said is like either increasing or decreasing. We are talking about a factor here. The variable that we are talking about, e.g., we can talk about carbon dioxide level. We can talk about water. We can talk about glucose. All these are examples that we are giving. We are saying one as a factor, as a variable, it is a variable, it is a variable. A change in either of these, which we have identified as those factors that we identified in the first place there, any change in them, we are saying if it deviates from its set limit, from its set point, a negative feedback loop is activated. So a feedback, guys, is that ability of the body or ability of the control center to give a relevant corrective scientific response to changes that are identified within the body. So we are saying that in a way is working towards controlling homeostasis. So we have got example one that I'm giving you here. Example 1, if body temperature rises, sensors detect this change. I'm giving an example of the negative feedback because one thing, students, that you need to take note of is that you are to answer this question where you are supposed to give by giving a typical example or give a specific example that can be illustrated or that can be quoted as in terms of explaining the negative feedback that we are talking about. If body temperature rises, sensors detect this change and the body initiates mechanism to cool down that temperature rise. So what mechanisms can be there? We are giving an example, e.g., sweating. This response reduces the initial increase in temperature, bringing it back towards the what? The normal. So I'm sure here you know that the body initiates mechanisms that are there to cool down. We are quite aware of these. For example, sweating can be one of them. We can talk about the vasoconstriction and the vasodilatation of the blood vessels, which also has to do with the control in terms of the flow of blood regarding uh, thermoregulation. So I want you to understand this. We have got many other examples that we can come and use or that we can as well apply in this case, but I have got this one as another way in which we can explain negative feedback. So what happens is that when changes are identified, there is stabilization. Stabilization is therefore the controlling or the ability of that control center to bring back a change that has been identified. So by opposing the initial change, negative feedback loop helps to stabilize the system and prevent excessive fluctuations. So stabilization is basically controlling, or we can talk about managing the change that we have talked about there. Managing the change, class. Managing the change. So by opposing the initial change, which we said is change number one, negative feedback loops help to stabilize, they help to manage, they help to bring back to normal the system and prevent excessive fluctuations. Excessive fluctuations are those extreme changes For example, we are saying there is excessive of glucose in the body. That excessiveness of glucose is excessive fluctuation that we are talking about, which at the end of the day would result in what? In negative problem. I mean, in serious problems. For example, diabetic conditions. We talk about illnesses. We talk about other situations that are also excessive. So let's look at this homeostasis mechanism. The homeostasis mechanism. I want us to look at this. How does the homeostasis mechanism work? The homeostasis mechanism, how does it work? So here is the homeostasis that we are talking about. We have got the receptor, we have got the control center, and then we have got the effector. This is basically a flow of communication, a flow of coordination that takes place in terms of homeostasis control. We are saying this is homeostasis control process is what we are seeing here. So I want us to quickly look at this. So what happens here is that an imbalance triggers a stimulus to an imbalance. We said that deviation or that fluctuation triggers a stimulus to the receptors at 2. An imbalance triggers a stimulus to the effector to the receptors at 2. An imbalance which is detected, we are saying it triggers the receptors at 2. When stimulated, the receptors generate an impulse that is transmitted to the control center at 3. So receptors identify the receptors. We are saying they are stimulated and then they generate an impulse. Here, what is happening here? This arrow is showing this is an impulse being it is being sent to control center, to control center, or to 3. 3 is the control center that we are talking about. An impulse is being sent to 3, which is the control center. So the control center again, what does it do? The control center responds by sending an impulse to the effector, which is the target organ 4. Here again, we are saying it responds by sending it responds by sending an impulse to the effector, which is the target organ at 4. The target organ then reverses the imbalance, and therefore balance is restored at 5. So what you need to understand is that all these are impulses. These are signals being transferred. These are signals being transferred here. Signals being transferred. So is that the signal is transferred from the control center, it is sent to the target organ. We said there we can just say that we have got the effector. We are talking about the target organ here. The target what? The target organ is the effector there. So the effector sends now, it sends a reverse, it actually responds by the target organ then reverses the imbalance and a balance is restored at 5. So here number five, what is sent is what? Is the feedback. What is the feedback? The feedback that is to reverse the situation. Reverse the what? The situation. That is what I want you to take note of. So at stage 5, we are already having the balance being restored. As you can see, this is like a seesaw number at this diagram. The way it is looking like, it is showing something like a seesaw whereby one is heavier than the other. But these arms, you can say arm 1 and arm 2, they must be just at equal. They must be what? They must be at a balance. So, but then right now, because there is an imbalance that has been signified, that has been identified there. So an impulse is being sent to the control center, and then the control center sent also another communication to a signal that is being sent now to the effectors, that is the target organ. And then in that case we have got a feedback which is being sent. A feedback is being sent. What is it about? Reverse the situation, bring back the situation to normal. So here now we have got now the restoring of balance taking place. Restoration of balance. Restoration of balance. This is quite interesting, and this is so nice and quite scientifically expressed with regards to the balancing of the internal system. So understand this class. This is basically a further illustration or a further uh, expansion of our first explanation that I've given there. We are talking about the reversing of the situation and also the imbalance. And now we talk about the achievement of balance, the restoration of the balance at number 5 that you are seeing there, where the process must be balanced, that we have identified in the first case there. So the homeostatic control of the internal environment, what happened is that the tissue fluid which surrounds our cells, which surrounds the body cells, constitute the internal environment. The tissue fluid which surround the body, which surrounds the body cells, is actually uh, it actually constitutes an internal environment, which the condition within cells depends on the condition within the internal environment. So the functioning of cells is dependent on how the internal environment is like. So what happens is that there is either a prohibition or either a stimulation of the functioning of the cells, either to certain extremes, depending on the situation. The cells can also be destroyed, they can also die. So what I want us to understand is that the tissue fluid which the body operates, it actually constitutes the internal environment, which has got some narrow limits, which we are saying it must be maintained, it must be kept to a certain limit. These internal environment, these internal environmental conditions, they also affect the what? They also affect the whole discussion that we are talking about, homeostasis that we are talking about. So when faced with changes from either the external environment or internal, the human body controls this effect and homeostasis is achieved. So in respective homeostasis, it actually control, it manages the internal environment with forces that are being uh, exposed or that are being sent from either internal or external environment. Homeostasis, it controls that. When changes arises, whether caused by internal or external factors, the human body actually controls that, and homeostasis is therefore achieved. So in other words, without when if ever there is no homeostasis, organs, systems, and ultimately the whole organism may be negatively be affected. We can talk about saying the organs, we are talking about the body parts, we are saying the systems, we talk about various systems, the digestive system, we talk about the respiratory system, we talk about the reproductive system. All those are systems of the body which are working as a result of a narrow balance that must always exist within the internal environment. So if ever that homeostasis does not exist, would have, or it's actually malfunctioning, an organism is affected in its performance and functioning, and ultimately it might also die. I'm sure you know now we have got typical examples. Like a typical one is this one, which we are referring to as to say, either we can talk about infertility, which is caused because some hormonal imbalances. We can also talk about uh, diabetes as a condition caused because of a failure of homeostasis to maintain, which of course not necessarily to say is the only one, but we are saying when conditions such as these are not maintained, there are such errors that would arise. So important variables and homeostasis mechanisms that want us to understand is that we are going to look at the balancing of water, the maintenance of salts in the body. We are going to talk about the regulation of thyroxine levels in the body. We talk about the balancing of glucose that we are talking about just now. And again, the regulation of carbon dioxide concentration for purposes of survival of body cells. We are saying it is also another homeostatic mechanism that needs to be talked about and discussed. And finally, we talk about what thermoregulation, which is regulation of body temperature, number 6. So all these are all homeostatic mechanisms that we can discuss. These are variables that must be talked about or that needs to be understood when we go to uh, metric grade 12 life science. So let's look at homeostatic control, and then we want to give typical example. These that I've identified upstairs here or on top here, I want you to understand that we want to look at the stimulus, we look at reason for the balancing, and then also the effectors, which we said also is the what is the target organ again. So what I want us to quickly look at is that the stimulus, for example, we talk about the stimulus as what? As one. We say we can talk about this stimulus as what? As one. One, we can talk about what? About water. So all metabolic reactions require a balance of water and salt concentration in the blood and surrounding tissue fluid. So there is always supposed to be a balance of water. Remember, water is used in terms of dissolving all the solids, all the dissolvable substances that are useful to the body. Please understand that these all we can give them as what? As substances. For example, minerals. We can talk about them as an example. We talk about salts. All these must be what? Must be controlled because the amount of water in the body is the one that regulates that. What is the effector into that? What is the effectors? We have got the kidney and also the skin, which are responsible for balancing of water. I'm sure you remember the skin when we talk about uh, the wide opening of what? Of the sweating glands. It is the skin that is also in regard to that. Let's talk about the salts is number 2. Salts is number 2. So the response, the presence of dissolved salts in the blood and tissue fluid determines it affects osmotic pressure, which may contribute to cell losing or gaining water, and water by osmosis affecting the balance of these fluids. What I want you to understand is this scientific term to say osmotic pressure. It is actually a concentration gradient that is created because of a variation in terms of salts inside within the internal environment. So what happens is that the osmotic pressure causes the active movement of what? Of specific minerals and also even the absorption of water in the body cells, which is a very important process again. So what we are saying is that that concentration gradient causes the movement of factors that we are talking about from their region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration, which is now that movement which is controlling the two systems, whether to say it is up or down. So what is the responsible effector to that? We have got also the kidneys as the effectors in that regard. And then carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, the presence of carbon dioxide produced during cellular respiration affects the pH, which we said that pH is the potential hydrogen atoms that are found within a what? Within a certain cell or within this. So what we need to understand is that the potential hydrogen atom affects the alkalinity and acidity conditions of a given environment. So in this case, we are saying the pH of the blood in the it affects the pH of the blood and also the fluid, the tissue fluids. Again, what I want you to just be quickly referred and reminded of is this. I want you to understand and remember that respiration is one of the fundamental metabolic processes that we cannot just uh, forget and either not talk about. Respiration is the breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to have what? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So we can give it as a summation of factors to say it is equals to uh, glucose plus oxygen producing carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. Plus water plus energy. So what you need to understand is that the question here is saying carbon dioxide produced during cellular respiration. This is the cellular respiration that we are referring to, which produces what? Which produces the carbon dioxide. It produces the water. It produces the energy that we are saying the body needs. So carbon dioxide plus water plus energy, plus water, glucose plus oxygen, it causes the liberation of carbon dioxide, it causes the availability of water that we are talking about, and also eventually the energy. These I just wanted to mention, but in passing to remind some of you. So now, this also there are also enzymes. Enzymes are extremely sensitive to what? To pH. Enzymes are also extremely sensitive to pH. Enzymes are catalysts, which also increases the rate of chemical reactions. They speed reactions in the body. They catalyze. They actually ensure that processes are taking not longer than what they should do in order to ensure that the body is functional. So pH variations also affect the performance. pH variations affect performance or functioning of what? Functioning of enzymes. That is one thing that you need to understand. pH variations affect the performance or functional variations. Functioning of enzymes. So the acidic conditions or the alkalinity conditions, these enzymes are quite sensitive to that. Remember that these are protein natures, substance. Protein nature factors that we are talking about. So these need to be undertake. We need to undertake an understanding up to that. So another point to talk about is what is glucose. The concentration of glucose in the body needs to be controlled to ensure body levels. I'm sure you see glucose concentration. It's actually explained in the previous explanation that I gave there. So to ensure that energy levels can be maintained, you see the availability of energy. Energy is produced as a result of what? Of the availability of glucose. So and metabolic functioning to can continue. We are saying life processes can continue because we are saying when glucose is there, an oxidation process occurs. Oxygen is going to allow the liberation of oxygen, the liberation or the production of energy, the production of carbon dioxide, and also water, which is as a result of glucose. So the target organs for that also, it is the liver and the pancreas. I'm sure these are making sense. And then we can talk about the thyroxine as another hormone that we need to talk about. And the cellular metabolism is regulated by the hormone thyroxine. I'm sure you remember that slight variations in the amount of thyroxine can have a severe effect on the metabolic rate of an individual. We are going to look this also in just near future, where we need to talk about the specific uh, effects of an over or an under secretion of a certain hormone. So thyroxine gland, the target organ is the what is, I mean, the thyroxine hormone, it targets the thyroid gland. Lastly, we want to look at temperature. An increase or decrease from normal body temperature can affect metabolism due to the effect of enzyme activity. We said these are protein in nature. Enzymes are protein in nature. What happens is that an increase in excessive high temperature can either deform them or it can cause them to lose their shape, which can as well affect their functionality. So enzymes, they can be denatured. We are talking about uh, high temperatures destroy, high temperatures, they destroy, high temperatures destroy what? Enzymes, whereas low temperatures slow down their performance. Low temperatures, low temperatures retards their performance. They make them to be inactive. So what we need to understand is that there is an optimal temperature that must be maintained. Optimal temperature that must be maintained to uh, for effective functioning of what, of enzymes. I'm sure that we understand. So, classy, here I was just giving you a quick and summarized version towards these homeostatic mechanisms, why they should be maintained, and what is the target organs for each. So, we'll go back and look at them at a more deeper analysis. When we are going to look at the balancing of each of these, we are going to talk about them. So in any case, I hope that this has made sense and you are going to get a good understanding of it. But in any case, you are welcome to give your feedback, to contribute also, and also to like, share, and turn on your notification buttons. So therefore, we keep connected. Let's do this. Science is quite an interesting subject, and metric help can make the journey very short. We cannot repeat, we cannot fail. But what do? We excel. Let's excel together. Share to friends, share to families, subscribe and like the videos. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful stay and all the best in the upcoming exams. Thank you once again.